Hello, welcome back to Touchline Talk, here with a very interesting special episode. We're talking PE. Dom Tollan is with us. Dom, hello.
Hello, how you doing?
Good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, all good, thanks. On holiday, so I can't complain. School doesn't
Yeah.
start back. I'm not even going to talk about going back to school yet, so I'm just going to enjoy the week.
This is the perks of being a PE teacher or a teacher, no?
Absolutely, yeah. And the sun shines outside, which is unusual for Scotland, so...
Yes, yeah, I know. I mean, here in Spain, we have a lot. So for you guys to get it as well, I'll send a little bit more sunshine your way for the rest of the summer.
That's appreciated, thank you.
So, Dom, looking through, your CV, and when I was chatting to you before, I think, when we talk about PE education, your experiences, your qualifications, the things you've done really, really interest me. And I think for those sort of PE teachers out there, this is going to be a fascinating episode for them to tune in and watch. And I guess before we sort of really delve into some of those key points, my first question, just to give a bit of context for the viewers and stuff, is just give us a little bit of information, Dom. What are you currently doing at the moment in the world of education?
So as you'll find out, I've kind of dotted around here and there, and I've got different kind of experiences and different backgrounds. But currently, I'm working back at secondary PE after the summer in the same school I was in. So, which I only found out about kind of May that I was staying on for the year. That's another story for another day. But I'm currently doing that. On top of that, I'm the SAT PE journal editor, so the Scottish PE Association. I've been doing that for nearly 10 years now. Involved with SAT PE as part of the committee as well. I'm kind of leading up some of the primary PE stuff as well with that. And on top of that as well, I'm on the committees for EIS, the teaching union, and I've kind of put forward some motions, specific for PE. I'm a learning rep as well with the EIS as well, so I've used that. I delivered last year just a course on progressive pathways through primary PEs, because that was one of the ones that we're trying to make a push on, and just try to raise the profile of PE and make sure that PE is getting equal status on the curriculum, but also getting more provision in primary school, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I guess that's always an interesting topic. Now, I guess we have that in secondary as well. Where sometimes PE can fall a little bit with the view that it's not as important. But obviously, as we know, as PE teachers, and we'll always fight for is PE is such a huge part of a child's development.
Absolutely.
Not only physical, but also mental, psychological. And I guess, through your experiences and your roles now, that's something you're really trying to push the importance of and help other educators and teachers understand that.
Yeah. I think it gives. I think it's a different domain for learners. We know that different pupils work in different ways, and different young people work in different ways. And I think to have the physical domain, where some learners maybe they're not as comfortable in the classroom, can still learn aspects of numeracy, literacy, as well as developing their health and well-being and the kind of the social and mental aspects as well. And I think that during the COVID pandemic, we had that we're encouraging everyone to go out and, for your well-being, for your mental health, for even for socialising. And I think that's these are the kind of the things that don't always get talked about with regards to PE. About it does touch a number of different things, and I think it's really important that we've got that kind of baseline, we've got that good habit established early, as early as possible. But I think over time as well, when the kind of push for academia and things like that becomes important, PE starts to kind of fall by the wayside and literacy and numeracy take precedent. Whereas I think it's important to make sure that they recognise other facets of the curriculum as well, especially the kind of physical.
Yeah, I mean, why do you think that is the case? Why do you think sometimes, in some, it's not every school. I mean, there are some schools out there that are absolutely fantastic and really, really supportive of PE and the benefits it can have. Why do you think sometimes some schools feel that, and it's a traditional one that I've seen it many times, where, it comes to mocks, comes to revision classes, and students are just pulled out of those PE lessons to go and do, extra revision for other subjects. And it just seems to me that, in those moments, PE and the benefits of PE is just devalued, and, the importance for those individuals is taken away from that. Why do you think that's the case?
I think there's a couple of things. I think, obviously, when people talk about schools and academia, they think reading, writing, counting, all of these things. And I think that, that kind of takes precedent when it becomes, when it goes on to kind of government figures or local authority figures. I think that's the stats that they look at. They look at, can my child read? Is my child reading at this level? Can they count at this point? Can they do their times tables and things like that? And I think obviously that's very, very important. But I just think that because, PE's always kind of had that peripheral kind of view from some people. I think maybe it's a confidence thing as well. If your experience of PE, haven't been as good, and that's where we'll come back to primary PE later on. But, if you haven't had that kind of positive impact at an early age, you maybe don't understand the kind of the additional benefits that it can have on, your literacy and your numeracy and all of these other things. And obviously the kind of the biological impacts of, physical activity on the brain and things like that. But I think there's that aspect. There's the kind of pressures from within, what looks good in paper, but also the kind of confidence aspect of you've either not had that good experience, like I've said, or you're maybe just not as confident delivering it. And I think, certainly for PE teachers, obviously we're kind of really pushing the agenda, all the time. But I think when you're in primary, when it's more kind of, it's a broad base of learning there. If you're not as confident at a certain area, especially, you think about some of the kind of physical aspects, it's quite daunting to do gymnastics, to throw a javelin, or to do, there's things, there's kind of safety elements there that maybe teachers say, I'm not confident at doing that. But one of the things we've tried to get across, and I'm trying to kind of push, is that, teachers are the expert, the pupils are the people that are those that you're teaching. So if you're the expert for them, and it's just PE is just the kind of vehicle for lots of different types of learning. And if we can enhance the kind of knowledge and the confidence and make teachers aware that it's not, it's not difficult to do it, and you can find your own kind of style with that, then I think that goes a long way to kind of helping not just PE, but just pupils' development across the curriculum.
I guess that's probably the biggest challenge. And obviously, you have the big difference between primary settings and secondary settings. And obviously within a secondary school, you have subject specific teachers with, real clear experience and qualifications on those subjects. And obviously primary traditionally has not always had that focus or experience within a primary setting for those primary teachers. Obviously, I know that, there are different programs and different ways where outside companies will come in and deliver PE, or there's more schools that have a primary specialist. My brother actually works in a primary school as a PE specialist. So there are some schools that do have that that specialist in there working with that. But just very quickly before we sort of just take it back a little bit, for those primary schools or those teachers that are working in primary schools that don't have that specific experience in terms of teaching PE, where can they go to sort of upskill themselves, and or what sort of pathway could they take to help better understand the pathway of PE, and obviously the importance of that?
So I think obviously now, obviously kind of Twitter, social media is really good for, there's different primary groups. There's kind of obviously Twitter groups, and there's, there's lots of videos and lots of kind of resources and things that are out there. I think that the one thing that's maybe not out there so much, and this is one thing that we're trying to work on with the PE Association, is maybe how to, you've got all these little, jigsaw pieces. It's about how to put them together and how to structure them, across a yearly programme, and make sure that pupils are getting a kind of broad experience of different types of PE activities. And I think it's one of the things that we did was, one of the things that I did just before the summer was a progressive pathway about what we're looking for at each age of the primary curriculum. And I think, just to talk about play for a little bit, and play pedagogy is one of the things that they're trying to push really in Scotland. And again, it's, there's play specialist teachers. And again, we're trying to kind of push the element of, if you're an expert in play, then that's your specialism. And again, it's just, like I said before, PE is just that you just find what kind of things that we're looking for, what are the kind of fundamentals we're looking for with regards to physical education that we can use, but in that setting. And I think that just empowers teachers a little bit more to do that. But there's from our point of view, we're doing a lot of support with the EIS Union. We're doing a lot of kind of different kind of courses and things like that up in Scotland. Scottish PE Association, Start PE. We've got our conference on in September, and we've got kind of online CPDs and things like that we're delivering as well. So I think it's just, we kind of work off the teachers as well. If, I'm always kind of put myself available to any teachers that are looking for advice and things like that. My wife's a primary teacher. I've got a lot of friends that are primary. So it's trying to kind of build networks and build that. I'm trying to do that within the local authority as well, because I think sometimes it's just, teachers are just lost and they don't know where to go with things. It could be in a kind of a national level, but I think even just having nearby high schools that you can go and tap into a PE teacher and say, like, I'm looking for something on this, or even just to kind of share resources and things like that. Maybe you don't have all the resources, or you don't have the facilities, and it's just trying to find out ways of how you can actually deliver within the kind of the context that you're working within.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. First of all, fair play to primary school teachers. I know quite a few, and the challenge to, I mean, for me, I'd find it really difficult to be a primary school teacher because the sheer depth of information that you've got to give those students in those ages, it's massive. It's really, really challenging. And obviously, then to add PE to that as well is really, really tough. I'm fortunate that I enjoy working with secondary school students, and I get to just focus on PE.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is, you look at that as well, and there's actually a massive opportunity to, we've done a lot of kind of sport ed kind of stuff before as well with groups, and I think you've got a massive opportunity. In secondary school, you get a class for a period or a double period, and then they move on. You don't see them for another week. Whereas I think when you've got a class, if you use PE as part of a kind of a wider kind of subject area, I think you can start to kind of drip feed a lot and make it a lot more meaningful, and that kind of then starts to feed into other areas of the curriculum, and gives that a bit more depth as well. So you actually can pull all that together and use that to your advantage. But I totally agree. I think that I've worked in a primary school before. It's there's a it's a lot to be working with, and a lot of different things to be an expert in, so to speak.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and like you say, as a primary school teacher, you have such a huge impact, because you're with those students for so much of the time. So, if you're well educated and you're well balanced between all the different subjects, I guess you can have a really, really positive impact on those students and individuals for sure. I agree with you on that one. Dom, just what I want to try and do now is just sort of take it back a little bit. And just sort of, look for a little bit of your journey in terms of how you got where you are now. So what were the first sort of steps into teaching? Why did you want to be a teacher? And just start to talk to us a little bit about your journey.
Well, I'll take you all the way back to start. Obviously, when I was younger, my first experience of kind of sport and physical activity was through my dad. My dad would take me for kind of fun runs and things like that would do, and he would take me out to do table tennis or badminton or go to the gym and things like that when I was a little bit older. And I think that kind of exposes you at that kind of stage that you start to get a little bit of an interest in that. We were fortunate that our primary school had a PE teacher that came in. It was part of a kind of a government funded project at the time. So we had some drip feeds of kind of PE, but not kind of overly, because obviously they were still restricted at that point. And I think as we went through secondary school, you start to kind of get an interest in sports, and you kind of you get an enjoyment of that. But the problem was that if you're good at something, you're obviously good at your different activities during school, but we never really got the opportunities in our school to kind of push beyond that. So, we would do a curriculum PE. Our PE teacher was quite strict. We didn't do any clubs. So we ended up having to just take our own initiative. We would get the keys off the janitor after school. We'd go in, we'd open up the cupboard, set up gymnastic stuff. It's probably a health and safety nightmare if somebody's thinking about that just now. But we were setting up doing handsprings and head springs and all sorts. We'd do basketball after school. We would set up our own games. We'd do indoor football and things like that. And so I think we saw what we were looking for, and we kind of went with that. And I suppose that kind of self-organisation at that point maybe kind of did kind of start to feed into, maybe this is something I want to do to provide more opportunities for kind of for others to participate in things. I did when I was in secondary school as well, I did a primary school placement just as part of my work experience, and I think you start to get an idea of I quite like helping people. I quite like that kind of environment that you're kind of bringing the best out of people. I also helped out with my brother's football team for a number of years as well. And through that, my old head teacher in my primary school, kind of gave me the opportunity to do some coaching qualifications. So I think that kind of set that kind of foundation. As I say, through secondary school, because our PE teacher was strict, I didn't really kind of go down that route until later on, until I got to sixth year. And then I started to think, well, this is what I enjoy. I enjoy working with others. I enjoy kind of bringing the best out in people. And that's what started me on the path. I applied for different courses. Not all of them were kind of PE oriented, but the minute that I went to an open day at Strathclyde University, I spoke to the head of the course there. They said that, look, we're going to be doing PE teaching at the end of this. and straight away I just get that vibe. This is definitely what I want to do, and I haven't really looked back since. So I went through the 4-year degree. I think we were the second postgrad year in our university to be doing that. And at that time, postgraduate PE courses weren't very common. So there's always this thing that there's Edinburgh would do the 4-year course, and there was a little bit of, some people were giving us some funny looks saying, how come you're doing that in 1 year and everybody else is doing it in 4? But we're actually, our course was geared towards, PE teaching anyway. There was a lot of, there's PE was run through a lot of different activities, a lot of things that related to kind of PE teaching. But we did 5 years for, so we did an extra year on top of that. But I think it was just hard for some, old school teachers to kind of get a handle on that at the time. So straight away, you're kind of, I think all the way through from that point, you're just try to kind of push back a little bit and kind of prove people wrong. And I think that maybe that's just my nature, that the kind of stubbornness and determination. I think if somebody tells you can't do that, then it's just, no, I can do it. I think that just helped to push me through to get a teaching qualification as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely clear to see, when you're at school to sort of set up your own clubs and to work on different sports. I mean, that is a show of determination if ever I've seen it. I guess as you say now, obviously health and safety has become a lot more apparent and stuff like that. So those sort of aspects of free play and, taking a little bit more ownership, it's probably a lot more difficult now than it ever has been. But yeah, I mean, I think that shows, the determination that you had from a young age to be involved in sport and try and set up your own things. And actually, you probably learned quite a lot from those experiences. And one thing that really stood out for me from what you just said there was, and for me, this is a massive thing, is for you to go and do work experience in a primary school. I guess was that year 10? Was that sort of year 10 time, or when did you have work experience?
So I'm trying to think. I always get mixed up with how the English system works compared to the Scottish. So that would have been 4th year for us. So it'd have been about 14, 15. So I don't know what age.
Okay, yeah, somewhere like that. I mean that's massive. Yeah. I mean, to be, at that point of secondary and to go and do work experience in a primary school, not many people, go down that sort of pathway in terms of experience. I mean, were you 100% sure at that time that was something that really interested you, or what sort of led you to do that as work experience? Because that is fascinating.
I think. I mean, even when you get to the end of university, you're still kind of not 100% sure what you want to do. I know that I said, obviously I wanted to do teaching, but there was still other opportunities to do other things. But I think that can just, I was looking at the work experience program, and I was thinking, what would I like to do? And you're kind of overwhelmed almost with the choices. But I just think something about that just stood out, and it helped. It was my old primary school, so at least there was a bit of familiarity there. But it was just something that I just thought, teaching's all, something maybe I quite fancy, just trying to see what it's like and see it from the other side of the curtain, so to speak. So so that was that.
No, it's pretty cool to be in that situation, that sort of young, and obviously, we always talk about that sort of those sort of challenges when you're a teacher, and depending on what age you're teaching, how old you are, how close you are to the students you're teaching, the challenges that can pose you. And I guess, to have those, however, probably 2-3 weeks of experience in that sort of environment was probably quite cool and quite eye-opening. And obviously, it's carried on that sort of love of teaching that you have now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, fair play to you. That's really, really cool. So obviously, from that point to go to university, and then your first steps into teaching, how were your first sort of years once you've qualified into teaching? Where were you? What phase of education were you teaching?
So I think you've just dipping a little bit back into the kind of university kind of side. When I was studying during university, I went out to America for a couple of summers to do football coaching, and I think that the timetable, or the kind of the resource that they used, was a kind of teaching through games, kind of learning through games kind of philosophy, and I think that kind of carried a little bit of my kind of philosophy as well. That young people are learning, but not necessarily knowing that they're learning. So you can set it up in such a way that, they're doing things, they're having fun, they're enjoying it, you're putting names on things, you're calling it after cartoon characters. But at the same time, they're still learning those fundamental skills that they need to learn. At that stage, it was football. And I think that you kind of carry that into university. I always had an interest, I think, to maybe kind of put a kind of structure behind that. And again, it's kind of come back to kind of what we're talking about, from a teaching level now and from a kind of developmental level now. It's just trying to put a structure to that. So you had all the kind of the individual skills about, I know how to deliver, lessons or sessions, but how do we structure that in a kind of a major way? So when I was at university, I had a big interest in talent identification and talent development. And a lot of that looked at kind of fundamental skills and about, making sure that, and there was some of that kind of covered, mental kind of aspects, emotional aspects, as well as the physical. So I think I carried that into my teaching with that kind of mind that this is the kind of things that I want to develop when I go into the teaching. When you do the postgraduate, though, obviously you've got to work within a certain structure, and you've got to work within, you've got to go with the school structure and work how the teachers want you to do it in different departments. I wasn't, I was very kind of open to just doing what I was told to do, but I think there's a certain frustration with that as well, that I think kind of internally that what I've been looking at is the kind of right things, but you don't want to be, when you're young, you're full of bright ideas, and you don't want that to come across as arrogant. But I was, you're trying certain things, and teachers will say, no, you can't do it that way. This isn't the way we do it here. And that kind of stifles you for a long time. So I think that, and even when I've gone into my teaching career as well, I think sometimes it's just your luck about, you get into a school that kind of fits your ideals, and you find a teacher that, I've had really, really good kind of principal teachers that I've kind of worked under, I've been a student under, who've encouraged you to say, look, you're the next phase of teaching, you're the kind of young ones, you've got new ideas to bring to the table, but obviously kind of keeping you, on the leash as well, and keeping you grounded so that you don't, because you still need to kind of have that experience as well to learn, how to do things. There's certain things you can't do. And I think on the flip side as well, I've had other principal teachers that have been quite kind of stifling and quite kind of, and you've just got to get your head down and get through it and just do what's asked. And I think when you come out of that, after your kind of your student years, after your kind of postgrad year, you get through that. I think then, obviously still working within a curriculum, working within a department, you get a little bit more free rein to try things out without somebody looking over your shoulder saying, don't do that. And even when I was a teacher, I had a principal teacher, I'm not going to go too much into it, but I mean, that was a horrendous year that I had. But she'd be looking over my shoulder. It was a very challenging school. There was groups of kids that I thought, I need to burn off their energy, because if I don't burn off energy here, then they're going to be giving me, a hard time for the lessons. We're doing basketball games, we're doing kind of man marking basketball games, TIG games, things like that, kind of getting them really kind of burned out at the start, so you could actually teach some of the kind of fundamentals after that. And she was coming in afterwards going, why are you giving them chasing games? They're a difficult group. And you're going, but that I know that works. She'd even be kind of picking up in the blackboard saying, you've not drawn your hockey lines correctly. So even though I'd taken that straight from a book. So I think that just probably said more about her than it did about my teaching. But I think that's the challenge, is that when you're in a place sometimes it doesn't quite understand what you're trying to do, then you've got to kind of stick to your principles and say, well, I'm going to do what I think's best for the pupils. And I think as long as you don't go too far off kilter with that, as long as you kind of stick to your ideals and your kind of philosophy, and at the end of the day, as long as you're doing that for the benefit of the pupils in front of you, I think that's a more than valid thing. And I think as teachers, we'll get inspectors in, we'll get people coming in saying, why are you doing this? And I think it's just having the confidence to stand up and say, this is why I'm doing it. And if I can justify what I'm doing, then it's more than valid. And if it's for the best of the kids, then I think that's more than valid for me to be accepted to do that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And your experiences over in America, and I think that's the big thing when you're a new teacher, for example. It's a matter of trying to get as many experiences as possible, try and question people, especially if for people and for teachers going through their NQT year, their teacher training. It's all about question, and pose those questions to your mentors and find out, okay, why is it like this? And a couple of things you said I really, really liked. And, I think the more you question, ultimately, if what, that methodology or ideas are behind those sessions, you can then start to it's not a matter of trying to catch people out or pick them apart. It's about trying to understand the rationale behind why you're doing those sorts of types of lessons. I'm a massive lover of TGFU, always have been, really like that style of teaching. I say TIG games, tag games, all those types of activities are such a key aspect of physical literacy. That's where you get your fundamentals in.
Yeah.
And, it's really, when you have those experiences and you've taught those lessons for so long and you've taught them in different environments, it's then very easy to defend those types of lessons
Yeah.
because you can say, okay, well, I'm doing tag games. And I'm doing tag games because look at how many times they're changing direction. Look at how many decisions they're having to make in split seconds. Look at the change of speed. Look at the challenges. The area size can be bigger. I'm looking at more high speed velocity. The area size is smaller. There's more change of direction. We're going to work on agility, balance, all of those different things. And I think ultimately, when you start to question each other and you start to explore with your mentors and you spend more time teaching PE, those are sorts of things that, in terms of fundamentals and physical literacy, tag games, TIG games, that almost, for me as a teacher, is almost a fundamental part of almost every single lesson. I mean, you could do that in every single lesson. You just change the challenges, the numbers, the size, the different ways of scoring points, etc., etc. That style of lesson almost could be a staple in every single P lesson because the rewards that individuals will get from that practice is unbelievable.
Yeah, I think that the big thing about that as well is that the kids are having fun, and I think that, and we'll probably talk about this as we go on, but you do TIG games in your class, not obviously with certain equipment, but you can do it. I actually wrote an article for the SAP Journal on different types of TIG and about how that can develop other. It's not just letting them run about and chase each other. You can actually tailor it to suit the activities you're going to be doing later on. But that's something that kids can go out in the playground and they can, if you're talking about having an impact and having a kind of lifelong learning impact on that, you can go into the playground, they can see, let's do that TIG game that we did in PE, and straight away you've achieved because you've taught the skills, you've taught the knowledge, and they've taken that on themselves and they've used that. And I think especially, the kind of next phase of my kind of teaching after that really difficult year. Obviously, I get into SEN teaching, we call it ASN teaching up here, but working with special educational needs pupils. And I think TIG games in that was really important because you had some pupils that weren't very mobile, and that you're trying to encourage them to play or to kind of be active. And always thought the ones that weren't active or weren't moving as much, at least if you tagged them and you put a physical element onto that, so you have to do 3-star jumps or 3 float jumps, at least they were still engaged, they were still part of the game, they weren't kind of sidelined from that. Whereas if it was about, if you were trying to do, run up here and run back, they wouldn't have done it. But at least doing that with the TIG games there, they were still engaged in the game. And if they were getting caught 20 times in that game of TIG, they were still, being active to some degree.
Yeah, and that's ultimately, as PE teachers, some of the key fundamentals that we try to achieve in PE lessons. It's engagement. We want to have, and we want to try to foster a lifelong love of physical education, which ultimately is one of our biggest jobs as PE teachers, to make sure that we foster that. Engagement, as you're saying there, is hugely important, and games like that are fun, that are involving everybody, because again, you can change the numbers, and sometimes when you do TIG games and you've got a group of 30 and there's only 2 TIGgers or 2 taggers, there's a lot of people that are not involved. So you just change the numbers, you change the dimensions, you change how many groups there are, and those sort of things can go on for hours and hours, and the rewards that students can get out of that is massive.
Yeah. No, definitely, and I think the key there, we're talking about educating, teachers that maybe aren't as well versed in PE, and I think the kind of key point of that is that to make sure that you're not just letting them run about. That if you are doing games like that or doing TGFU games, that you know exactly what you're looking for as a kind of baseline. Obviously, on top of that as well, ask the kids what they thought they got from it, and that's something I do at the end of my lessons. We've got our benchmarks in PE, and we've got them up in the wall in every kind of hall that we've got, and it's sitting the kids down, and you've obviously got an idea of, today we're going to develop speed, we're going to develop cooperation skills, but then you say, what else did we develop there today? What did you get from it? And sometimes the pupils can educate us as well and can give us, information that we didn't even, factor in at the start. And we go, that's a really good point. I'm going to write that in my lesson plan for the next time, and I'm going to make sure that's another kind of fundamental aspect of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think sometimes I don't know if this is a general sort of view, but I think sometimes tag games can be seen just to only develop those sports that are invasion. But if you look
Yeah,
at some of the rewards that tag games can give you, even in sports like badminton and tennis, it's that change of direction, change of speed, analysis of what's going on. You know, it just has such transferable skills to
yeah.
so many different sports. We'll have to move on from tag games because
Yeah,
we could talk about tag
I
games
know, I know.
for, for ages because they're just so
So much.
versatile and they just offer so much. It's such an easy practice to put on. The kids love it, as you say. Everyone's involved. Everyone's engaged. Obviously, as long as you set the parameters fine. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on a little bit because you just sort of introduced a little bit there. Obviously, you've got experience with special needs students, with primary students, and secondary students. So,
Yeah.
just give us a couple of little pointers or little things that you think for each of those. For teachers that are working with special needs, teachers who are working in primary, teachers who are working in secondary. And I know we're going to touch a little bit of your philosophy and the transition, which is huge from primary to secondary.
Mhm.
But maybe if we start sort of on the special needs sort of side of it, for those teachers that are working in special needs, how would you say, for those teachers to sort of structure their lesson, or what are key elements that should make up a good. Obviously, we can talk about Ofsted, in
Mhm.
inverted commas, about excellent lessons or outstanding lessons. But what would you say is really vital to have in a lesson for special educational needs students?
Well, I think when I first started the SEN school that I worked in, I didn't really. I had some experience of working with some pupils that had come into my secondary school with Down syndrome and autistic spectrum disorder. They came in to use the fitness suite in the school, so I worked with them and kind of oversaw what they were doing. That was when I first started teaching. But I think ultimately, you know, it might sound really simplistic, but every pupil you work with has got an additional support need of some sort, and I think it's maybe just thinking, don't be overwhelmed if you're working with a group that's got that kind of label of additional support needs. I think you've got to think, well, every pupil's, it might not be identified, or it could be just that they've had a bad day, or they've come from a certain background, or there's loads of things. So every pupil's individual is probably the kind of simplest way of saying that. So I think that when I went into the SEN school with just secondary school experience and that kind of small bit of experience working with the ASN kids before, I think it was, I'm not going to have any kind of parameters here. I would really want you to strive towards, I've taught in secondary school, I've taught basketball, I've taught football, I've taught badminton. I want you to try and strive to achieve what every other pupil has achieved in a mainstream setting. And I think that kind of set my philosophy. When I went to the initial coaching course, it was always about, you start with the core and you either extend it or you support it. Whereas I think when I went into work with those pupils, I think it was, no, don't start at a core, because if you do that, if you can start from a lower point, then I think that some of those pupils, they're more wily than they let on. So if you just give them the kind of easiest things to do, they'll do it. Or sometimes they'll say, I can't, they'll refuse to do it, or give the impression that they can't do that. So I thought, no, I'm going to start from a kind of high level, the kind of level that I would work with with any other pupil in my class, and you just work your way down from there. In actual fact, I think that helped extend these pupils more than if I just had that kind of core kind of point to work with. Some pupils were really, and I had staff, support staff are obviously in the class with you saying, "Oh, they can't do that; they're not capable of doing that." And then 5 minutes later, they're doing it, and you're kind of going, "Well,
Yeah.
we wouldn't
There you
have known
go.
that if I hadn't challenged them to do it." I think part of that came from when I was going for the interview for the job. A deputy head who I got on really well with in the year that I had that not so good principal teacher, but I had a deputy head that was really helpful, and he said, talk about focusing on what they can do and not what they can't do. And I think, again, that's a kind of really fundamental
Yeah.
aspect, is what can they do. And I think I've delivered an online CPD for the Primary Physical Education Assembly as well on SEN. And I think one of the things that I put forward there was, you want these pupils, some of these pupils, are in wheelchairs, or, are not as, not as, as involved as maybe other pupils would normally be. And it's hard to kind of get that response from them. But I think you've got to try and make them experience, if they can't do, if they can't throw a ball, how can we give them the same experience as every other pupil of throwing a ball, and try to work your way back from what's the ultimate goal and what's what is it that they can do that gives them the same impact to that. And some of the things were, for example, if somebody couldn't throw or catch a ball, you'd be just pushing it into their hands so that they're still getting the kind of physical sensory sensation of kind of feeling the ball and getting that kind of. And then if they're dropping it, that's still like an element of throwing it. For jumping, it could be, there's some people that were unable to kind of lift themselves off the ground, but if you told them to stamp, at least they're still getting that kind of kinesthetic feedback of if I was going to be jumping, or they could just push their toes up. It's just looking at every pupil's different, but they're still getting that kind of element of, or they're still getting the same experience as what everyone else is, but just in a different kind of level. So I think that was that was one important thing, was make sure as a baseline, they're getting the same opportunities to experience what everyone else is. I think from the next point of that would be, I think, to make sure that that we're pushing for high achievement, so high achievement in the class or just achievement within their own level. When I was at the interview, I talked about I want some of these pupils to go on to Special Olympics level and to kind of really push themselves on. We had pupils that went to Special Olympics for boccia, Special Olympics for athletics. We had a boy that won. He came third in the cross country for Scotland as well, which was there's a kind of funny story about that. But I'll tell that another day. But he won that. So again, we've got pupils achieving there. But we also had pupils that where again, we had pupils with cerebral palsy that were in a chair. It's unfortunate that the physio said if we'd been more intense about if they'd had more opportunity for kind of physical experiences, more physio treatment, he would have been able to walk at some point. But in the class and in PE, we're trying to give him opportunity to get out his chair, to stretch his legs, to kind of push down his legs, and to kind of at least give him that opportunity that if he was to get some more intense physiotherapy, there is that kind of opportunity. So that's the kind of scale of what you're dealing with. It's, from a kind of sporting achievement level, you're kind of pushing that, but also from a, kind of life skills level. Some pupils, would struggle to get onto the bus because they couldn't step up. So that would be a target for them. We can put up steps, we can put up kind of step boards, teach them how to step properly. And that's a fundamental kind of functional skill for them for life. The other element is about when they go after school, it's about being able to socialise with others. If you're passing the ball to somebody else, you're socialising within that group because you're engaging with them at some point. So if you can't speak or if you can't communicate with others in a kind of more mainstream way, you're still kind of engaging with other pupils. And I think that the kind of last probably point in that is that in Scotland, and when I first started in that school, it was the start of Curriculum for Excellence, which worked from early level, which is about age 4 or 5. Oh, technically it starts at 3, but that's kind of nursery. But we were working with age 4, 5, all the way up. Our pupils left at 18 or 19. Some of them stayed on until they were 19. But if you were to say, and this comes down to the kind of Ofsteds and the kind of assessment things, but if you were to say that pupil's early level because they can only achieve early level, then they would be just flatlining all the way through school at early level. And you can't teach them, you can't be doing, things that when they're in P1 all the way through up to P7, it's got to be age appropriate. So I think, again, it's trying to change the context for them. So they might still, not, they will still improve, but there might be a certain kind of ceiling for them. But I think, again, it's for the experience to make sure that they're still experiencing age appropriate things and they're being challenged at age appropriate things. And actually, maybe when they get older, if they've had that experience all the way through and you're pushing them each level to go on, there might be certain things that kind of come out of that as well. And you don't want to be kind of, and again, that's just trying to give them the same experience as everyone else. So as they get older, they're not doing kind of, sit down circle games. They're doing, basketball, football, athletics, or whatever more kind of structured activities like that. So I think, again, it's just giving more opportunities to kind of be the same as everyone else.
Yeah. I think I just wrote down 3 points that probably sum up that those sort of experiences and that sort of summary that you gave. And for me, the 3 words or 3 words that I put down was differentiation. I think the ability for us as teachers to differentiate based on each student's individual needs is massive. And I know, we could talk about differentiation for ages, and I know for your experience, with special needs, primary, secondary, you have to have, even if you're just in secondary or just in primary, your ability to differentiate, from what you're saying there, for me is absolutely critical and crucial. Next point, as you mentioned there, the standards, having those high standards for students in SEN, and getting them to try to strive towards, what you would expect other students to go and get to achieve, and then work backwards from that. And it's a case of working out and finding out what they can do, and working with that, and keep striving to get them to push on, which I really like. And the last point, as you just sort of finished on there, was opportunity. Making sure that everyone has that opportunity, differentiating how you structure different parts of your lesson for those students, and then trying to get them to strive to have the highest possible standards. I think probably for me they're the three sort of main key words that I'd take from what you mentioned there.
Definitely. And I think that even though that was applied to pupils in an SEN setting, I think I've probably taken that into a more mainstream setting as well. So if you've got pupils that say, I can't do that, I'm saying you can do that, because I've had other pupils that are capable of doing that.
Yeah,
or it's just
absolutely.
a case of, maybe you don't like this, but we're just trying to find your level and find what you enjoy doing. And again, that's leading into that kind of lifelong participation of physical activity and sport and PE and things like that. So I think that's something that I've just kind of carried since I was working with ASN pupils all the way through into my mainstream teaching, so to speak.
No, for sure. Really, look, my next sort of question, this is a bit of a broad one, and I know time-wise we're a little bit short, but really I just wanted to just sort of get a bit of a summary from you in terms of sort of your philosophy, and then, that sort of, and we always talk about it massively in terms of that transition between primary and secondary, but just, if you can, just give us a little bit of an overview of a little bit of your philosophy, linking that into primary, linking that into secondary, and then how you see that transition between primary and secondary.
So, after I worked in 9 years with additional support needs, as at the same time as working 2 days in a secondary school, so I was still having that kind of experience. I moved into primary school for 5 years, and again, it was starting from scratch, having to build the curriculum up from that. So you're trying to kind of plot an overview of how can I make sure that all these pupils are getting a wide range of experiences. They're getting athletic activities, they're getting individual activities, they're getting team activities all the way through, and also having some wiggle room on there for maybe there's something that, just a little bit, off kilter, but something that the pupils might engage with, and we can work with that and just develop it as a group. So I think I made sure that, from all the way from August all the way through to kind of May, June time, that you had a kind of a clear, yearly overview for your different year groups, but also from early level through to kind of when pupils would leave in P7, which is up here, to make sure that you had a kind of a clear progression about how you approach things and about what you're looking for. And obviously early level, we're looking at fundamental movement skills. We're trying to kind of embed those skills. I think all the way through we're trying to embed fundamental movement skills anyway. And I think actually what changes is before they go to secondary school, it turns into fundamental secondary school. So what do you need to survive when you get into secondary school to be able to participate in activities in the curriculum there without struggling or without being turned off by that? The way that I did the structure in the course I've done recently, and I think I put it online. I think I put it on SatPE, some forums and things, but I can share that, is that the primary school I worked in were massive on play pedagogy. I think they're sector leading at that, and that kind of shaped my viewpoint about how to structure lessons. So we would have our pupils, our kind of younger pupils, maybe 3-4 times a week. It would be maybe 40 minutes. I think we've worked out recently that we could maybe do it 30 minutes a week, and we could try and do that as a daily thing. But which actually then kind of makes it more straightforward for teachers to be doing that if they've got the appropriate dress where they can just go in and out from that. But I think it's to give them opportunities to play. So obviously I spoke to some play experts, and they said obviously with PE there has to be a certain structure because we still want to be delivering those fundamental skills. But it's about how you approach that, and about how we allow pupils to have time to explore and to engage. We would have a free play Thursday, because that was the last day that they had PE. We'd set up, maybe we'd been doing ball skills that week, but we would leave out lots of different types of balls. We'd maybe leave out some additional equipment as well. I said sometimes to pupils, like, the cupboard's there. If there's something you want out of the cupboard, don't be dragging it out. Because some of the younger pupils, like I said, I can get something for you, but fundamentally you can choose something from the different piles that we've left out. You have to put one thing back, and that's trying to encourage responsibility and tidying up as well. And then you can go play, and actually then just stand back and just say, right, what are we looking for here? What are we, what's happening in front of us? and just kind of learning from the pupils. And you would see pupils setting up. There was one of the things that stood out was I had a group of pupils that got a hoop. We didn't have basketball hoops set up at this day, but they got a hoop, they got a ball. One of them stood up on a bench and held the hoop out, and were playing basketball with each other. I thought that's fantastic that they've just had the initiative to do that. You had pupils that were throwing frisbees to each other, or some of them would be arguing, he's got a frisbee, I've not got a frisbee. And I said, well, throw it together, so you're encouraging cooperation skills with that. So if you walked in at certain points, it would look like absolute chaos. In actual fact, again, it comes down to that why. Why are we doing it? If a head teacher came in, my head teacher was very supportive, so there was no chance of that. But if somebody was to come in and say, "Why are you doing this? This looks chaotic," you'd say, "Look at what's happening in here. Look at the different pockets of pupils." And some pupils that don't engage with PE as much would still be going, "Well, I'm quite curious to try and find out that." So you're encouraging that curiosity of PE. They're enjoying it, but also if you've been teaching them skills during the week, you can look at saying which of those pupils has picked up those skills, which of them is taking that forward. So that's the kind of early phase of that, and then it's about the kind of next part of that. The next phase of that would be to kind of towards middle primary. Would be to look at TGFU. So they've already learned how to play games. They've kind of learned that. Let's give them more opportunities to play, but just in a different context, and just looking at kind of more more structured, principles of width and like kind of game kind of principles as well. We can start to foster that, and this is a kind of very simplistic view for pupils that are for teachers that are non-experts. At least if you can do the play in the kind of early stage of primary school, in the middle part you look at TGFU, and then as you get to primary 6, primary 7, as they're starting to leave, look at sport education. I think that's a kind of good basic structure to work from. Obviously, if you've got more expertise, if you've got more knowledge that you build from that, then you can start to add on elements of that as well. And obviously, that doesn't take into account your kind of dance activities and your gymnastics, but you can still kind of incorporate some of these principles into that. So that's the kind of structure that we did, and we kind of did a course that we showed you kind of snapshots of each one and about how they feed into each other. And I think then by that point, hopefully, if they've had that full exposure and that kind of full kind of progression through primary, hopefully when they go into secondary school, if they've been taught the kind of fundamentals, if they know how to serve a shuttle over the net. I had pupils in primary 4 that were doing that, 8, 9, and I went into first year after being in primary school for 5 years and had pupils that couldn't do that. And I'm saying that's raising attainment basically. If you can deliver PE in primary school and get those fundamental skills there, that's you raised attainment straight away, because when they come in first year, you're not focusing on the basic skills, you're focusing on the rules and the kind of principles of play, about how to develop games, how to cooperate with others, so you can then start to kind of introduce more higher order thinking skills with that. So I think that kind of gives, that's basically fundamentally what I'm looking at. And just a wee point on the kind of play aspect, the play pedagogy. I know we're running out of time, but the kind of play aspect, I wrote an article in the SATP journal, and it was about a teacher that was asked to deliver play but wasn't as comfortable at doing it. And I think it was play with literacy as well. And her idea was she was kind of punctuating and putting full stops in red pen and crossing out things. And actually the kind of head teacher was saying, no, but actually what we need to look at here is they've got sentence structure, they've got a story, they've got a beginning, middle and end. And I think as PE practitioners, we need to look at, don't punctuate things at an early stage with rules and with principles. Obviously can have certain fundamentals that they need to work on, but you're trying to encourage individuality, you're trying to encourage a love of the subject. And I think as they get older, then you can start to kind of put, punctuate, so to speak, the activities that they're doing with rules, with principles, with kind of more kind of wider aspects of that. But at that stage, it's just about trying to foster the kind of enjoyment and the kind of love for it and the kind of experiences. And the more that pupils are participating in it, the better they're going to get. And you're always going to be the facilitator there to make sure that you're steering them in the right directions. And I think that works for, both the early years, but also works for first, second, third year, all, through secondary school. I think it's just making sure that it's just a different approach. It's just making sure that they're always participating in some way. And if you've got them in your class, you've got them in the hook, and you can develop it from there. So
it definitely gets harder now. Obviously, that transition from primary to secondary obviously becomes a lot harder, and the challenges are much greater. And like you say, there in terms of the participation aspect, especially when they start getting to the end of year 9, 10, 11, that's where things become really complicated. But what we were talking about earlier in terms of primary, and then what you're saying there, the importance of trying to get it. It's always difficult to try and get it right, and how you determine right is a really open question. But to try and give those individuals in primary schools the best possible platform to try and have success with what you teach and what those primary teachers are delivering in primary schools ultimately will be a huge factor to how much success they can have in that transitional year and then to secondary school.
Yeah, because I think obviously that there's always going to be challenges when pupils go up to secondary school, and I think obviously hormones can start to kick in and peer pressure and things like that. But I think if you've got those skills already fundamentally embedded, I think that takes away one of the kind of challenges you've got. A lot of pupils will come up and say, I can't do it, because they're feeling quite self-conscious about it. They're self-conscious because they haven't really participated as much, or they've maybe not been given the opportunity to develop those skills. So they take themselves out of it because they don't want to be laughed at or ridiculed, or just have the self-perception of failure. So I think if we've got those things embedded earlier, then hopefully that takes away one stigma. Obviously you're still pushing up against the other kind of challenges at that point, but it becomes more of a natural thing to be taking part in PE and physical activity and sport at a kind of later age, because you've already been through it for all those years. So there's no kind of, there's no kind of intimidation about, stepping into PE lessons thereafter. But if they're not exposed to that, then it does become more daunting for them to do that.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate in my current role. I work in an all-through school, so I work with the primary teachers, and we're always able to have discussions and question each other and work together. And obviously, when you're in a situation like that, it's so much easier to embed a whole school curriculum and make sure that those students are going to be more or less where you want them to be.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you don't have that situation, which most of us don't, is trying to create links with local secondary schools, trying to communicate and talk and have conversations with those secondary PE teachers. And I do know that there are some in one of my old secondary schools in Southampton that a couple of PE teachers actually do some work in a primary school and actually help support and deliver some work with primary schools. And that sort of program, that sort of support, hopefully, is happening moreover in the UK. And if not, that's where, you can really share good practice, good experiences. And, the transition between primary and secondary can be much easier for those students. And ultimately it's going to upskill those primary teachers. The students are going to get much better experiences, and then ultimately then, physical literacy for all of those students in that educational pathway is going to be improved.
Yeah, definitely. And that has a lifelong impact. Again, we're going back to the importance of PE, and you think that's the kind of lifelong impact that they're able to participate in something out with school that's keeping them healthy, keeping them, giving them opportunities to socialise, and basically enjoy themselves as well. And I think that's the kind of key part of, I know we talk about the kind of the additional benefits that PE gives with literacy and numeracy. You can still do these things, but ultimately we're trying to strive to beyond school. What are they doing out with school and beyond school? And if they're engaged and have a positive attitude to sport, PE, and physical activity, then we've done our job. But,
I mean, I know we're basically out of time, but just to sort of recap and just to sort of finish, I mean, your experiences in all of the pathways for pupils, your experience with writing in the journals and different publications and stuff like that, for teachers who are going back in September, whether that be, specifically for SEN, for primary, or for secondary, what couple of little bits of tips or advice would you give those teachers who are planning their curriculum for the year? What would you ask them to really think about and make sure that they've got added in their curriculum plan?
I think know what you're looking for. Know the kind of fundamentals that you want to teach and what you're looking for from your pupils, but also, don't be daunted about if something doesn't work initially, then carry it through for a little bit. Have confidence in yourself, and you're a teacher for a reason. I think it's look back and maybe tweak things, but be confident in what you're trying to deliver. Have that kind of carry it through, and don't be put off by somebody saying you can't do that. I think also just enjoy yourself as well. I think especially, PE's got that, we've got a massive opportunity to just enjoy ourselves in what we're doing, and just because of the nature of it. I think it's, if you're enjoying what you're doing, then the pupils will enjoy your lessons as well, because that will come out naturally. And obviously, if you're told to teach a specific activity, you're obviously told to teach a specific activity, but you do it in your own way, in your own style, and the way that you do it. As long as you can justify what you're doing, then I think that nobody can put you down for that. So hopefully that's a good takeaway message for. I was trying to think of something profound. I think I'm very big on, teachers are the expert. You've got your pupils in front of you. Do what you enjoy, do what they enjoy, and just trust yourself.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important. I think, having confidence in your own ability, confidence in your own experience, and ultimately, we ask the same of students. We ask students to make mistakes, be willing to make mistakes, have that growth mindset approach. And I think, obviously, ultimately, we need to have that as teachers ourselves to be brave with what we're trying to do. Obviously, reflect on what we do, and reflect on what we do to go, okay, like you say as well, just because something doesn't work doesn't mean it can't work. If you don't adjust and adapt and tweak a few things, it might just need a couple more minutes for the students to understand what you're doing, and then it will come to fruition.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what you've said there, Dom, and your experiences and some of your advice for teachers has been brilliant.
And I think the other thing actually has just come to mind as well is, learn from the pupils. So give them opportunities, ask them questions as well. Say, how do you think that works? Get feedback from them. I've done that with pupils before for certificate classes as well, and said, what would you like that would engage you more? And they gave me some suggestions, and I said, well, this is what you asked. So if you're empowering the students to kind of, to be part of that kind of learning process, then I think as well that kind of helps to kind of push you all in the same direction as well. So learn from the pupils, whether it's standing back and watching what they're doing, or kind of directly asking them, what do you want, or what do you understand from this? I think you can learn a whole lot as well that you can use to take forward as well.
Yeah. No, Dom, I just want to say a massive thank you for giving up your time and stuff like that.
Thanks for having me.
I know there is an absolute mountain that we could still talk about, and we could probably still be here until late tonight. Just wanted to ask you if people have got questions, are they okay to send them to you? I mean, they can put them in the comments here. They can send them over to me. I can forward them on to you, or we can try and get those answered. And yeah, obviously, being a teacher is a really complex, challenging job. But obviously, we do it for our love of improving students, and hopefully the viewers will take a good. I mean, I've taken some really good points away from yourself today that I'm going to reflect on and think about how I can add in and put that into the curriculum and my thought process for September. So,
Yes, that's good to know.
really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your advice, your wisdom, and your knowledge. And I'll make sure I pass on any questions that I get for you, and hopefully we can keep improving the quality and standard of PE for people out there.
No, definitely. No, thanks for having me on. Really, it's been fun.
No, it's been great, Dom. No worries. Thank you very much, and take care and speak to you soon.
And you. Thanks. Bye-bye.